Good afternoon. Again, I'm Ralph Bennett, co-chair of the Affordable Housing Conference of Montgomery County. It's a pleasure for me to introduce the panelists and moderator for this afternoon's session on essential cross-sector housing partners, which is jargon for people who specialize in activities other than specifically housing, healthcare, transportation, education, and employment. The panel will be moderated by Carmen Larsen, who has over 20 years experience in the information management technology industry, which brought you this conference, management consulting and public policy, an experienced business process improvement analyst and facilitator. She's provided extensive technical management and consulting services to the public, international, and private sector. Her work has spanned healthcare, education, agriculture, environmental impacts, economic development, and now affordable housing. She's treasurer of Montgomery County's Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors and also serves as board chair of Montgomery County's Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Melissa Bondi is state and local policy director for the Mid-Atlantic for the Enterprise Community Partners and has more than 20 years experience as a professional policy expert and community leader on governance, public policy, and civic engagement. With diverse credentials in housing and human services, the environment, economics, sustainability, and planning development, Melissa has led coalitions, formal review processes, and community organizing in equal measure to achieve consensus with lawmakers, stakeholders, and constituents on a wide variety of local and regional issues. And I want to point out that she's an important part of the Purple Line Corridor Coalition, developed by the University of Maryland Center for Smart Growth to assist the Purple Line in meeting all of its objectives across the board. Gloria Aparicio Blackwell is the founding director of the Office of Community Engagement at the University of Maryland College Park, a colleague of mine. Through advocacy, she didn't know it. Through advocacy, storytelling, planning, service, and partnership, Gloria and her team build bridges between the university and surrounding communities. She has worked at the university for more than 23 years. Her primary focus is overseeing the university's commitment to the land grant mission and ensuring that Greater College Park remains a top-tier college town. She's known for her convener skills in bringing together community leaders, advocates, nonprofits, government agencies, businesses, and campus stakeholders to address critical challenges impacting the neighboring communities. And by the way, the City of College Park shows the impact of her skills as they build a new City Hall. Dr. Rolando Santiago is Chief of Behavioral Health and Crisis Services in Montgomery County, where he oversees mental health and substance abuse prevention, treatment, and recovery services in child, adolescent, adult, and senior outpatient services, access to behavioral health crisis and trauma services, and the management of state and federal funds for county-based behavioral health programs. Dr. Santiago began his career as a research scientist and then worked for 7 years as evaluation director and deputy branch chief of the Child and Adolescent and Family branch of SAMHSA. Prior to his current roles, Dr. Santiago led development communications activities at the Jubilee Association of Maryland and as executive director of the Lancaster Mennonite Historical Society in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and as the executive director of the Mennonite Central Committee, U.S., a worldwide faith-based relief, development, and peace agency. He's lectured on faith-based global health topics at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health over the last 15 years. And finally, Ben Wu is president and chief executive officer of the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. A Montgomery County native, Ben is an accomplished executive with over 3 decades of professional experience leading operations at the highest level of our nation and state. An internationally recognized technology policy expert, Ben brings to MCEDC a dynamic portfolio of promoting economic competitiveness and a proven record of driving transformative initiatives and creating partnership alliances with industry, government, and academia. Under Governor Larry Hogan, Ben served as the Commerce Deputy Secretary and Chief Operating Officer. Ben also served as U.S. Deputy Under Secretary of Commerce and U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Technology Policy under President George W. Bush. Prior to joining the executive branch, Ben served as counsel for 13 years to Montgomery County Congresswoman Connie Morella and the Technology Subcommittee of the House Science Committee. So that's our panel. Carmen, I give them to you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you for joining us for the 30th Annual Affordable Housing Conference Summit. And a couple of things, there will be a quiz on everybody at the end. No, just kidding. But we're going to talk about some very important things. I'm going to say that my name's Carmen Larsen. Beyond being the president and CEO of an information technology firm and having that technical background that Dr. Bennett had introduced me with, I just want to say that I've also been very involved in community issues and have served as the president of president, vice president in different roles on the board of directors for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for Montgomery County since 2004, and prior to that with the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Latin American Management Association. So affordable housing is dear and near to my heart because one of the things that I participate in every year in December, I joined forces with Janice Freeman, the president of the African American Chamber of Commerce, who's in attendance here. Thank you, Janice. And with Michael Lin, who's the president of the Asian American Political Alliance. And what we do is we look at issues, including affordable housing, for presenting our joint minority legislative priorities in December to the legislators who are, I think, kind enough to join us as well. So I am very keenly interested in this subject. I also serve on the board of the Affordable Housing Conference, by the way, but I'm very keenly interested in this discussion and impressed with the panelists who have joined us today, because each one of them brings a different view of how their particular area of work has such a codependence with the availability of affordable housing, to the extent that we are able to afford or to be able to have programs that allow equity in the ability to acquire housing. To that effect, to that extent, we're able to have a better society, and we can get people more engaged in giving back to the community because they will feel ownership in the community, not just in the housing. So I think it's a very important issue in that touches education, healthcare, and economic development, as well as some of the other aspects of life. I think that what we're going to do today is we're going to open up with Melissa Bondi, who, as the director of the, as a state and local director at Enterprise Community Partners with 20 years of experience as a policy expert in civic engagements and a fellow physics major. She's from the University of Rochester. Her career has spanned affordable housing and other policy issues in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And so she's looked at affordable housing and the impact of all these different segments on the ability for people to be able to live in the Washington, DC area and in general. But today we're talking about also the impact here in Montgomery County and in Maryland. So Melissa, I'm so happy that you're going to be talking to us and sharing some of your impressions and ideas. So thank you for coming and joining us, and I'm going to leave it to you now, and then I'll take it from there. Thanks.
Carmen, thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Also want to extend congratulations to everyone involved with the conference for 30 years of amazing community impact. Our panelists throughout the entire event today have spoken so well about the fundamental relationship between housing systems, policies, and outcomes, and also candidly between race and the intentional designed inequities that exist in our housing systems and persist even through today. We have seen the disparate racial outcomes and the effects of the pandemic on housing stability, job loss and incomes, health outcomes, educational participation and achievement, and many other forms. COVID has really only exacerbated racial equity gaps that have already existed in all of these areas in Montgomery County, but of course in the region and beyond. Increasing amounts of cross-sector research confirms that housing systems are the cornerstone for tackling and remedying both these inequities and the harm they cause. No system, as we know, exists in a silo. Our efforts need to be holistic, acknowledging the obvious ways that housing affordability, stability, and quality can positively impact and be impacted by other quality public systems. I'll try to use my remaining remarks here to highlight the importance of housing through the lens of just a few of these additional critical priorities. I'm going to start with health. Even before COVID, place matters when it comes to health. Where someone is born and where they live can be the most important or significant factors in determining their overall level of well-being. This is sometimes referred to as zip code as destiny. This could be due to demographic and economic conditions in an area and the relative access to things like healthy food, quality jobs and income, medical services, and of course, housing that's affordable. It also refers to the health of the housing itself. Is it free from lead paint, mold? Does it have adequate access to heating and cooling? And then what are the ambient conditions outside the front door, from the health of the air and water to feelings and legitimate public safety and security? Dr. Megan Sandell of Children's Health Watch had introduced a striking concept to describe the importance of housing to individual and public health. She wrote that quality, stable, affordable housing can and should be applied like a vaccine to prevent a variety of negative effects and consequences. Our major federal, state, and local COVID response policies that were outlined earlier today are centered on housing, access, and stability to protect individual and public health during the current pandemic. This is the most stark example of this fundamental relationship between health and housing. We also now have considerable data and evidence on the role of stable and affordable housing and education outcomes. Where a student's home is located matters. Do they have access to quality schools and curriculum that aren't a long travel time away from home? Are they populated with other students and adult educators who offer a mix of both familiarity and also diversity in identity and experience? These are factors that also contribute substantially to a student's social and intellectual education. But housing matters well beyond its location and proximity to good schools. Housing quality, affordability, and stability all affect performance. And this is true from pre-K all the way through college. Do students have safe places to study, prepare, and to prioritize learning, free from stress, instability, hunger, or fear? Any student with consistent access to a stable place to eat, rest, study, and be themselves is more likely to have the energy, motivation, and ability to prepare for school and to focus on participating in class. Another critical policy nexus is between housing and transportation. According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, housing costs rank first and transportation costs rank second in the greatest share of an average American household's monthly expenses. Households without adequate incomes often prioritize housing and transportation above healthcare, childcare, and other critical expenses, in part because without transportation, it is impossible to maintain a job or to attend school. According to the Center on Neighborhood Technology, the average American household spends almost 50% of their total income on housing plus transportation. In high-cost areas like Montgomery County, many of our households are spending 50% of their income just on housing. The purple line is one example and opportunity of many residents and other stakeholders working to solve for both housing affordability and transit accessibility to benefit existing and future communities here in Montgomery County. The Purple Line Corridor Coalition has adopted mission and goals to prioritize how to sustain and enhance local amenities for all Purple Line Corridor residents, including preventing displacement, increasing connectivity, and enhancing affordability, among many other goals. Through our work groups and partnerships, the PLCC is working to ensure this landmark public infrastructure investment is designed to benefit everyone in the corridor today and in the future across all of these vectors. With that opening food for thought, please let me turn things back over to Carmen and my fellow panelists. I look forward to learning from all of you in our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I want to tell all the people who are in attendance that we really are going to be entertaining questions in the chat room. So please feel free to put them there. I can't guarantee we'll answer all of them, but certainly I'll bring them up to our panelists as they come up and as we're able to respond. Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate your remarks. I find them very thought-provoking. And one of the things that you mentioned is it's not just about having housing, is it? It's about having housing in an environment that is conducive to a healthy and economically viable situation, right, for families, and to be able to have your children go to school and be safe. So I think those are important factors. I'm wondering if we can have Dr. Rolando Santiago talk to us a little bit about the impact of the availability of affordable housing in terms of the health and well-being of our communities. Dr. Rolando Santiago, as you may recall, is the Chief Behavioral Health and Crisis Services Chief Officer for Behavioral Health and Crisis Services in the Department of Health and Human Services. I did meet him and worked with him a little bit when he was working for Jubilee and looked at housing for people who have otherwise heavy barriers. But I wonder, Dr. Santiago, if you could talk a little bit about the codependence of health and well-being with affordable housing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carmen, and for the opportunity to be here and speak with you and to our audience today. Today, I want to discuss the affordable housing challenges and the opportunities for three populations. You mentioned, Carmen, that I used to work at Jubilee Association of Maryland. So that's one of the populations, the one that they serve, which are persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but also persons with mental health conditions and persons who are homeless. So those are the three vulnerable populations that I'd like to address today. First, let me start by painting the picture of homelessness in Montgomery County. Just a couple of weeks ago, Montgomery County issued a press release, which also there was a press conference related to this. And the press release indicated that the number of families with children experiencing homelessness here in Montgomery County decreased by 52% between 2020 and 2021. And this is according to the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Point in Time survey. And the overall number of persons experiencing homelessness in Montgomery County decreased by 14%. Since 2017, there has been a 35% decrease in the overall number of homeless individuals and a 65% decrease in homeless families. The survey was conducted on January 27, 2021, so it's relatively recent. And on the night of that count, there were 577 persons who were homeless in Montgomery County, and that's compared to 670 counted a year before in 2020. These decreases are good news, but there are still challenges. There's a myth that people with mental health conditions, with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or who are homeless are not interested in improving themselves. But this is not true. These vulnerable populations want to live in their own homes, and they want to control where they live and who they live with. In the past, one solution was to have these vulnerable populations be served in agencies that would control their housing and their services. And that was a challenge. But this is now changing. For example, separating housing housing control from residential and support services is a stated goal of the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration, commonly known as DDA. This movement of services away from provider-owned and operated group homes to supported living arrangements. In this movement, the individual owns or rents his or her own home. The movement is motivated by two major forces in the field, a field of services for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The first one is a philosophy of self-determination that advocates for individuals and their families to have more control over their lives, and this includes also control over housing. The second force is a changing policy of Medicaid. Medicaid has recently published service setting standards, and these standards advocate for individuals to receive services in settings which do not isolate the individual from the larger community. A second change at Medicaid is the unbundling of services. And with that unbundling comes clarification that Medicaid does not pay for the cost of housing. However, if provider-owned or rented group homes are not viable housing options for the future, what then are affordable and accessible housing options for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities or mental health conditions or the homeless? First of all, in the Department of Health and Human Services within the county where I serve, we have a program called Services to End and Prevent Homelessness. The mission of this service is to make homelessness a rare, brief, and non-recurring event by operating from a housing first philosophy. This service provides a full continuum of services, including housing stabilization, homeless diversion, and permanent housing. A second new opportunity is the Maryland Inclusive Housing Corporation. It was just created this past year in the state of Maryland, and it was founded by my good friend Tim Weems, who's the retired CEO of Jubilee Association of Maryland. The mission of this new corporation, the Maryland Inclusive Housing Corporation, is to help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities successfully access and maintain inclusive, affordable, and accessible housing of their choice by creating opportunities, identifying resources, connecting people, and providing services. And finally, here in Montgomery County, and I believe the CEO of this organization is present in our small work group this afternoon. We have organizations here in Montgomery County that are providing affordable housing for persons with mental health conditions. And one of them is Housing Unlimited. And again, the CEO is present amongst us. So if you have questions, probably we want to direct them to him. This organization, Housing Limited, provides affordable, independent housing for adults in mental health recovery. And it provides shared housing, single family, and 3-bedroom townhouses, and rent them at below market rates to qualified individuals. We should be proud of the increasing opportunities we have in Montgomery County for affordable housing for our vulnerable populations. But at the same time, we have much more to do. Not everyone is housed yet. So the challenges are still there, and we need to continue our efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rolando. I think, I think one of the things that is really inspiring to me is that you speak from the heart. And I have always always appreciated that. I think it's great. So because it tells us what an important issue this is, and we don't often think about it. We prefer to not think about those people who are in these very complicated situations. And you go to try to find, if you don't know about the services, it's really hard to access it. And we'll talk more about that. And I'm going to encourage people. I mean, there was a lot of thought-provoking things that have been said so far by both Melissa and Rolando. And I'm going to invite people to make sure on the bottom of the screen, if you kind of get your cursor to sort of buzz around in the screen, you'll see on the bottom of the screen, there should be a little bubble that says chat. And if you click on that, you can put in a question or comment, and we'll try to cover that as well. So thank you very much, Rolando. We'll come back to those topics. I think we'll have plenty of time to come back to those topics. So the other part, of course, and the whole, everything's tied together, isn't it? And then if people can't get an education or can't afford to get an education, or they might take out a student loan and then they get kind of stuck with the student loan, and it lowers their FICO score, and then they can't get housing, because they don't look like they can afford it. And even on rentals, they were checking your FICO score. And if they can't get an education, whether it's a trade or a secondary, sort of post-secondary education, it's more difficult. It's possible, but it's more difficult. So I have asked Gloria Aparicio to join us today. And you heard about her very substantial background. And I had the brief comments that she wanted me to say, and I'm just going to ask her to forgive me, because as I'm looking at all this, there's so much that I want to say about her. But Gloria, who's the founding director of the Office of Community Engagement at the University of Maryland College Park, Gloria has been working for many, many years. I think she's worked at the university for more than 23 years, but a lot of her focus has been in getting equity in education and in different parts that impact the ability to get education. And she wanted to work in education because it helps getting access to economic stability. And so I think that's her mission, is making sure that there's equity and access to economic stability, and education is one aspect of that. So I'm going to invite Gloria Aparicio Blackwell to join us. And I think she has a brief presentation she wants to share with us about this topic. Gloria, welcome to our panel.
Hey, Carmen, thank you very much for inviting me to this important discussion. And I am impressed with this panel, and I'm so honored to be among them. These two topics, affordable housing and education, are the key to the upward mobility in our society. These are two essence. And then, of course, we have the issues of how do we get to that. Now, I'm setting my presentation in a way to say, these are the areas that impact to get a good education. Because I do basically it's higher education. I'm in a 2-year institution as Montgomery College Board of Trustees that I've been serving for 11 years. And then I have a 4-year institution at the University of Maryland. In order to get to those two areas, you have to start thinking about having a foundation. If that foundation is not there in terms of learning, how are they going to succeed in getting their degrees, their license, every credentials that they need in order to be able to afford a home later on in life? As my previous presenter have mentioned, all these barriers that we see, crowded homes, disadvantaged neighborhoods, homelessness, and wealthy communities, in a sense, where you see all the manicure and the beauty of their spaces. They also have schools that have the resources. And why is that? Well, when you have education that is funded by property taxes, that is going to be an incentive to have a better school if the property taxes are high. So when we have neighborhood, in disadvantaged neighborhood, the schools are going to have limited access to a good resources for them to learn. So I'm encouraging around this time that we have a discussion about how do we fund our educational system. And I know Montgomery County does a great job in providing the support to the pre-K to 12, but how do we measure well that all the zip codes in Montgomery County are served for the kids to learn? Because at the age of 9, if they are living in a crowded home, as we saw in so many zip codes in Montgomery County, we see that if they are in crowded home, they are not able to learn. It's not a conducive place to learn. By the age of 25, they might not even being able to even think about going into a higher education. So I urge people to think about that. Having a good environment really will be helpful for the individuals to succeed. Yes, there are some people that have made it through, have gone through disadvantaged circumstances, and they have able to do it. But if we make it a little bit much easier, we're getting more people involved with that. And with the pandemic, the situation has become even harder for many of our communities. So in that case, I will say education is an advocate for affordable housing, because for us it's important. If people have a stable homes and they're going to learn, they're going to be very successful in coming into the schools and the whether it's a community college, whether it's a trade, whether it's a 4-year institution. And I share with you the earnings and unemployment rate by the level of education. This is from the education, the U.S. labor statistics. And you see the numbers by weekly rate, and the average weekly rate if you have these different degrees. So that is an important to say how much education can bring you to get out of that level of be living in a disadvantaged communities, that they can bring you out and to be in a productive society and enjoy the quality of life. So we are encouraging the students or the people to let you have options. And the options are that you can either go into a community college, you can either go to a workforce development programs in construction, in the trades, or you can either go to the 4-year institution. And we are going to make sure that each institution, whether it's Montgomery College, whether it's the University of Maryland, we're going to be providing all the resources in terms of scholarships, in terms of a program, in terms of mentoring and tutoring that can really help you to go through that. Now, when we don't have an individual that had that foundation of learning, we have to be having an investment. I can see that from Montgomery College, how much we have to invest in remedial courses that could have been used in providing more scholarship for people to get their degrees in 2 years, then moving if they want to go around and going to the 4-year, or going into the marketplace and getting more credentials to be able to get into the next level. So I always tell people that if we start from the pre-K to 12 to ensure that we have an environment they can learn, and then they have that foundation that it can really get them to be then into the 4 years, 2 years trade programs and going from that. Because I'm going to say, people say, oh, you can go into the trades. You also have to study for the trades. To be a plumber, you need to study. To be an electrician, you also have to know math and having kind of a background on that and having a foundation. So it is very critical that we invest on that. And that's what we come on. So the workforce development at Montgomery College is an outstanding programs. And I urge people to check their website, to really go into the Montgomery College website and learn about all the services, all the programs that are key. We're working very closely with organizations, with companies. And the last thing that I'm going to leave you, think about this. As we have these discussions, and we are going into this race, the race equity initiative in Montgomery County, think about what policies are leaving people behind. The reality that we live right now, that we have a lot of people that have too many barriers. We wanted to go to liberation. And let's try to do that all together. And I know there are a lot of questions going around, and I thank you for this with this moment, and I look forward to hear more from the rest of the group.
Thank you. Thank you, Gloria. I know it's very important that we think about how we access education so we can have better affordability. Um, I wanted to invite my friend and colleague and the president and CEO of the Montgomery County Economic Development, Dr. Ben Wu. Who has been leading a tremendous change and effort with the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and making some changes. It's sometimes a misunderstood organization. It's just it's a nonprofit. It's doing the work of trying to make sure that the county gets stronger in the economy. And I wanted to invite him to talk to us because to the extent that we can have a stronger economy in the county, we can also have better programs for affordable housing. And so I think that it's very important to hear from Ben Wu. Hi, Ben, are you here today? Yes, you are.
Yeah.
It's so good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think many people are not sure what MCEDC, what their mission is and what they do, and how does that play a part in us having a better community and more affordable housing. And so maybe knowing a little bit from you, what is the mission of MCEDC and what things are happening in MCEDC that help us have a better environment, better communities.
Okay, well, first, thank you, Carmen, for the invitation to be on this panel with you and the esteemed members of this panel as well. Carmen, when you went through your background and the litany of all the terrific organizations that you're involved with, you didn't mention MCDC, so I was getting very concerned. But
okay, I'm on the board. I'm on.
I know, but
I think Dr. Bennett mentioned it at the beginning. Okay, at the very beginning. Yeah, okay. I'm on the executive board of MCDC.
Yes, well, you're a valued member of not just our board, but also a member of the executive committee. So thank you for your leadership and your service to MCDC. So Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation is the privatized public-private partnership that is designed to help lead and structure the county's economic development. And it's a job, as Carmen said, that requires us to take a holistic approach at a number of things that impact economic development. And for Montgomery County, especially now with the pandemic, the recent economic recovery leadership in Montgomery County is being put in our hands at MCDC. And so it's something that we are looking at to be able to try to bring back our economy as we try to get to the other side of this pandemic. Now, we've seen some really optimistic statements from the president, from the governor, and also from the county executive and the council about where we're headed. The trends from a public health and safety perspective are very positive, and we're very optimistic that soon we will be at the other side of this pandemic. That day, though, has not fully arrived just yet, but we need to continue to make sure that we move aggressively and to be in a position where we're ready to take advantage of this crisis and create new opportunities once we are able to resume some sense of normalcy in our lives. In Montgomery County, it's very important for Maryland's economy. Montgomery County makes up 25% of the state's economy. And that means that we have a GDP greater than 13 states. So with our economic strength, we know that Maryland cannot fully recover from this pandemic crisis without Montgomery County leading the way. And so through this privatized entity that MCDC has become, we're trying to help rebound Montgomery County's economy by trying to form collaborative partnerships, trying to provide direct business assistance to hard-hit industry sectors so that they can recover, and also to bring together the business community to support an effective response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Back when the pandemic first was hit just a little over a year ago, the Montgomery County unemployment rate jumped dramatically to 8.6% in May of 2020. And that was when the pandemic's economic devastation was pretty much first felt. And through several major attraction, retention, expansion efforts that we've been able to do in a very difficult economic climate, MCDC is helping to drop the most recent Montgomery County March 2021 unemployment rate to 5.7%, which is well below the state average of 6.2% and also the national average as well. But we also know that the pandemic's impact is still being felt. So we have to position Montgomery County towards a lasting and a sustainable economic recovery. And that means forging several new partnerships with business, academia, and government. And these include recent collaborations that we've done in areas such as technology transfer and commercialization with federal laboratories, joint programs with statewide organizations such as the Maryland Technology Council and TEDCO, talent pipeline and entrepreneurship initiatives with our academia and industry. And I should also just tangentially footnote that I was very pleased to have served on the Montgomery College Board with the immediate past chair of the Board of Trustees from Montgomery College, Gloria. And we also need to try to make sure that our efforts to create a more inclusive economy for the future of Montgomery County needs to be addressed by tackling issues like social equality and access to capital. So that's what we're trying to do to support economic recovery in Montgomery County. And the importance of affordable housing to the economic development equation was underscored by the Montgomery County Council's economic development platform that they created back in 2019, in which housing is a pillar in economic development. And I think we know on this cross-sector panel that affordable housing does play a substantial and reinforcing role in local economic development. Because without a supply of affordable housing, employers, and not just Montgomery County, but the entire greater Washington, D.C. area, can be at a competitive disadvantage given the subsequent difficulty to attract and retain qualified workers. And so the development of affordable housing can increase spending and employment in our local and our regional economy. And housing can also act as an important source of revenue for our local government and can reduce the likelihood of foreclosure and associated costs on individuals and families. And Rolando talked about the health aspects. Gloria talked about the education aspects, and Melissa also talked about a number of those impacts as well. So we have a need to address affordable housing from a number of sectors. But from my perspective, looking at economic development, being able to advance affordable housing activities within Montgomery County benefits our local economy in the ways that I listed and in ways that had also been referenced by my past panel members. And I think that one of the great things about Montgomery County is that there has been no lack of attention on affordable housing from a policy and a community perspective. And so I know that our DHCA, led by Seema, is doing a terrific job in trying to look for new opportunities for affordable housing and look for new sites in various communities that can sustain affordable housing as well. And Melissa talked about the Purple Line. We see great advantages there. And being able to have a transit-oriented development, community growth from a business perspective, we are trying to make sure that we can couple that with affordable housing and new housing opportunities in order to really make that development along the Purple Line corridor sustainable and also equitable as well. The Center for Housing Policy found that the development of affordable housing can create both immediate and long-term employment opportunities as well as spending in the local economy. And the development and rehabilitation of affordable housing does provide from what we can gather from studies and reports, immediate fiscal benefits for not just Montgomery County, but also for the state of Maryland as well. And so in addition to these direct effects, the development of affordable housing can improve our Montgomery County fiscal condition in a number of indirect ways as well. And I think we had heard how through Gloria, Rolando, and Melissa, from education to health perspective, as well as from a business perspective as well. So I know that there are some questions that people would like to ask, so I wanted to summarize by saying that the benefit of this panel is to be able to reinforce the notion that there are cross-sector benefits to affordable housing, not just to the people who are going to benefit from the housing, but also from the structures of our community and our government that will benefit from being able to take a holistic approach and being able to encourage the private sector as well as governmental institutions to continue to support affordable housing opportunities for the benefit of our local economy. So thank you, Carmen.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate your comments on that. And one of the things that's always a challenge is to put our arms around what does economic development mean for the community. That it's not. Sometimes people think, oh, economic development, that just means large corporations doing better, right? So it's really not. It's really the sort of the synergies of the whole thing that well, there's job creation and people coming in and visiting and staying here and bringing jobs in, and the small shops and things like that. It's all part of the economic development, right?
And if I could follow along with that line of a discussion, Carmen, there is this misperception that businesses don't care about affordable housing. All they care about is being able to do whatever their business is. But that's completely untrue in Montgomery County at the very least. And I think that applies regionally and nationally as well. Businesses understand that for them to grow, they need to have a talent pipeline. And in order to have that sustainable workforce, they need to have people who can live close by to where they are operating. And without that ability to be able to draw in that talent pool, that means that the companies will suffer. And being able to afford your home, to be able to live with your family and to grow and enjoy the quality of life, nearby businesses, that's a factor. And that certainly impacts our ability to attract, retain, and expand companies. So I think that those who have this misperception that companies don't care about affordable housing, I would suggest to you that from our conversations directly with business executives and corporations, they do very much care. And they do want to be part of the solution, especially those here in Montgomery County in what we know is considered a wonderful place to live, but it's also a high cost location, not similar from Silicon Valley or Boston or some of the other innovation-led economy areas as well. So we want to address this issue as much as the companies do.
Carmen, may I follow up on that briefly?
Sure, please. I was actually going to ask you because I know that you've been doing some work on these policies issues. So yes, please
You're
go
so
ahead.
kind. Thank you. And Ben, thanks so much for all of your remarks and really everybody's remarks already. Two things to follow up just to add on to the great remarks you had, Ben. First, certainly in our work in the Purple Line Corridor, but there's nothing specifically unique about the Purple Line Corridor. We also have lots of business owners and employers who themselves need more housing that's affordable. We have small businesses, we have small entrepreneurs, we have those who may not have a retail storefront per se, but who are putting all of their available income into keeping their businesses afloat, especially during the pandemic, but even on either side of it. And so we have folks who inherently understand the needs for housing affordability because they are also struggling with the cost of housing and how that has evolved over time because we're in a high cost and in a very, an area of high demand in Montgomery County. And the second thing I wanted to mention is how much the work of the Purple Line Corridor Coalition has tried to center on these same questions. We do have a small business action team. We have a housing accelerator action team that are really trying to look holistically at how do we make sure that those who are big employers, small employers, and those who are also just trying to enhance their businesses in and around the Purple Line understand and appreciate the roles they can play. Caring about housing affordability is really important, but being a great employer doesn't mean you inherently know what all of the solutions are or the roles that you as a corporation or through your philanthropy or through your work and your voice in community actually moves the ball down the field so that housing affordability isn't as much of a barrier. And so I think some of these tables that we have, PLCC is one example, but not the only one, where different sectors and different forms of expertise can be talking to each other and saying, help us understand what your needs are, employers and business owners, and then let's have folks who are really good at thinking through solutions and policies or resource development or what have you to say, okay, here's how we can mitigate the harm and actually encourage good, and the role that all of various sectors could play to meaningfully contribute together toward achieving kind of those better results, I think is also really important to acknowledge. Thank you.
And going, Carmen, can I add something here too?
I was just gonna talk to you, Gloria. I was just that.
See, we're synchronized here.
Yes.
So it's glad to see you here, Ben, too. And it's true, the business community working with the community colleges and with higher education in general have given that opportunity to create. I was very pleased to hear one of the programs at Montgomery College where they having been working together in partnership with the biotech industry and bringing the hospitality and the restaurant people that were displaced to teach them to use their transferable skills to get into that business. And the beauty of that the business in that case, in the biotech, is at $60,000 up. So you get to create a sense of wealth, and then that talent that we are missing right now. And we're looking from anyone. We want white community, Latino community, Black African American communities to be part of this movement. And we have done a lot of marketing about getting to see the people that take advantage right here in Montgomery County, and how about to preserve that. I am a product of Montgomery College. I came from Venezuela, and that was when I learned English. I'm still working on it. And then from here, I transferred to a four-year institution. I'm in debt to the college because without that, I couldn't be able to be what I'm doing right now and what I'm doing right now here with you. So let's pass that wealth of letting people know that education is another catalyst for you to the upper mobility.
I want to bring Rolando in because I think one of the things that tends, because, it's just a more difficult subject, but one of the things that, one of the many things that is left sometimes on the table is the fact that there is talent, sometimes even trained talent, but that have some kind of a disability or barrier to work, right? So whether it is to have a barrier because they can't speak or they are physically have a disability. I know there's new words for this, so help me out. Forgive me if I don't use the right words. But I also the people who there's two kinds of people I would just bring up. One of them are the people who have a mental challenge, right? A developmental disability, but actually are very bright, on certain specific areas. I have hired somebody like that for a number of years. He's a genius in fixing computers, but he has something that socially he can't, he speaks very loudly. And so people sort of shy away. He's different. And then the other people are people who have had an addiction and are recovering alcoholics or recovering from some drug addiction. And those are people that need housing as well and have this history, whether they've been homeless or they're, or they haven't worked for a while and they have these blank spots and they have a hard time getting housing. So I don't know, what are the policies out there that can help these people out?
there's no doubt that those are barriers, jobs and lack of housing for persons with disabilities or mental challenges, or who have had a history of homelessness. And there are efforts in this county to try to work at all of the above, not just housing, but also, as you were mentioning, trying to locate them jobs. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've been discussing in Montgomery County a new initiative to bring in persons with disabilities in a variety of positions, very intentional kind of work. So I feel really, really proud that within county government, we're working on an initiative. But I know that a lot of companies as well, private as well, are creating options for individuals with disabilities and also with a history of mental illness or history of homelessness. There's also efforts in recent ones by the county council where we're removing barriers for persons who are homeless, especially on trying to expunge from their records low-level criminal acts, and some of that is being done so that they will have more access to both housing and to jobs. So I think we need to pay attention to these very specific kinds of policies, as you were mentioning, and support them and keep growing them and find ways to continue to remove barriers. That was a very wonderful point that you brought up.
And so, Ben, if I may ask you, there were questions about workforce development. What is the relationship between nowadays, some people may not know, between MCEDC and the workforce organization? Can you talk a little bit about what we're doing in the county with that respect?
Sure.
How does that work out?
So when County Executive Leggett privatized the economic development functions for the Montgomery County government, concurrently the workforce development efforts for the county were also privatized as well. So we were spun out into the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, and then concurrently the Worksource Montgomery was created as well. We work very closely with them. Matter of fact, they're co-located with us in our office, and that's by design because we have a shared mission of us trying to support economic development, and for them trying to help ensure that every Montgomery Countyan who wants a job can find a job. And so by working together to find out what businesses need and to be able to craft sector strategies, to be able to work with our academic institutions like Montgomery College, MCPS, as well as University System of Maryland and universities at Shady Grove, to be able to have curriculum development that can feed and create the certifications and the educational degrees required for this talent pipeline is so critical to our economic future. That is a shared mission that we have with WorkSource Montgomery. So we work very closely with the organization and also the Workforce Development Board, which is part of the WorkSource Montgomery apparatus. And so that is a partnership that we have. Anthony Featherstone is the new director for WorkSource Montgomery. And we have been meeting regularly to try to plot out ways in which we can partner together. Gloria mentioned the Bio Bootcamp, which WorkSource Montgomery has been executing, but we helped to support with our funds and also with some programmatic support with Montgomery College, as well as University at Shady Grove and UMBC. And that was designed to, as Gloria mentioned, to take some of the displaced workers, especially in the hard-hit hospitality industry because of the pandemic, and offer them another new potential vocation with training to the biotechnology life sciences sector that is continuing to thrive in Montgomery County, irrespective of the pandemic, and being able to train them on some of the entry-level lab requirements and certifications that are required in order for them to get a job into that industry. And so, that's one of the examples of how we at MCDC, we continue to look for partners, especially community and organizational partners, to be able to work with in order to fulfill our mission. And that's a particularly terrific partnership because it includes not just MCDC, but WorkSource Montgomery and the academic institutions, Montgomery College, USG, UMBC, and others. And so, we are always on the lookout as a public-private partnership entity to continue to try to leverage the assets of all of the stakeholders in our community, as well as working with businesses and industry to be able to make our economy as strong as we can, because it's going to require us all, in order for us to have a full economic recovery, to all work together. But then what we want to do is take that template of partnerships and apply that to the point where we are getting to the other side of this crisis, and so we can sustain these partnerships well into the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of our allotted time. Ms. Larsen, would you like to
Yes.
say some concluding remarks?
Yes, I wanted to say this is a very complex issue. I think in the summit, we've covered many different parts. There were concerns about racial equity in the job market and in the contracting procurement. I think those are things that were addressed in some of the other seminars. So I'm sorry we were just limited in our scope. But thank you very much for our panelists, and I appreciate just the wealth of information you bring to the table. And I look forward to working with you in our community to help make Montgomery County better and to ensure affordable housing for everyone. Thank you so much.
And our thanks from the Affordable Housing Conference to all of you panelists, and particularly Carmen, our new board member, and to everyone who's been involved in this. We appreciate your coming, and we look forward to seeing you at the 31st Affordable Housing Conference in the fall of the spring of 2022, without masks.
Yes, and in person.
Indeed. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ralph. Appreciate it. I've been in one year on the board.
Oh my goodness.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.